Hello, everyone. Very good morning and welcome to Unacademy, a one stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. So, before we start, can you please let me know if the audio video is fine? Please, in the comments, can you type yes if the audio video is clear? Okay, great. Everything looks good. So, welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. Let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 9 important articles. Let's cover them in complete detail so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. But before we start, I have a very important announcement. Unacademy is providing a 3-day free trial where you can access all our live and recorded lectures, and this is absolutely free. This initiative started on the 1st of August and ends today, the 3rd of August. You can access all our GS classes and as well as the optional classes completely for free of cost. You can even download the material and even take up the practice tests for both prelims and mains. So, this is the best opportunity for you to try out our courses, and those interested can click on the link provided in the video description below. And if you want the PDF of today's session, please scan the QR code on your screen. After the session ends, I'll be sharing the PDF over here. So let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 13, the Hindu carries a detailed article on the recent trade wars which has begun between US and India. US President Donald Trump has recently announced on social media that the US would be targeting India with 25% tariffs. He has even spoken about additional penalties on India to target India's partnership with Russia in the energy and defense sector. Now, these reports from the US has raised alarm in our country. It has raised key questions about the very status of India-US relations and how India would navigate this difficult period that has been created because of Trump's policies. See, India-US relationship has always been proclaimed as the most defining partnership of the 21st century. Both countries have built a solid strategic partnership over the last 2 decades. The US especially has seen India as a counterbalance to China. India has relied on the US for defense support, intelligence support as well. And we have built a very, very strong economic partnership. Two large democracies coming together to stabilize the Indo Pacific was seen as a natural alliance between India and United States. But today, Trump's policies is questioning everything about the India US relationship. It has brought up questions whether US is a trusted, reliable partner. Because these tariffs of 25%, which has been notified by the US government, along with the proposed penalties, as of now, we don't know what would be the extent of these penalties. But clearly, it's an American attempt to deter India from continuing its trade relations with Russia. The US has been accusing India of buying Russian oil at a cheap discounted price, and it blames India for funding the Russian war in Ukraine by bypassing the Western sanctions on Russia's energy and defense sector. So, as India pursues an independent foreign policy, we have always maintained close ties with Russia as well. And India has not followed unilateral sanctions in general, except for one instance in 2018, where even then it was the Trump administration in the US which had forced the Modi government to follow their sanctions against Iran back in 2018. And India was forced to cut off oil imports from Iran. This had a detrimental impact on India Iran relations. So India doesn't want to repeat that mistake with Russia. And in line with our commitments towards Russia, and as Russia has been a trusted, reliable, all weather friend, a key defense partner as well, India has largely seen the war in Ukraine as an opportunity as well to meet our own energy requirements. So when Russia started supplying cheap discounted oil, India started buying it up. And today we are the largest buyer of Russian oil and we are bypassing Western economic sanctions. So US and even European countries have always been critical of this policy of India. And now Donald Trump has called out this relationship of India and threatened additional penalties on India. Now, this is where the concern comes up. At such high tariffs with possible additional penalties, this could destroy India's exports to the United States. This could take a hit on India's overall GDP numbers because, as you have seen, Indian markets have already reacted adversely to these announcements, and we have seen a major crash happening in certain sectors of the Indian economy. So, through this article, let us examine in detail what would be the economic impact on India because of Trump's tariffs. What sectors in India would be hit? What would be the extent of damage on India's GDP growth? And what can India do going forward to counter the American tariff war? Now, if you look at India US trade relationship, the US is the second largest trading partner for India. After China, US happens to be the second largest trading partner for India. Our bilateral trade volume is approximately $129 billion. So it's a massive trade relationship. But if you look at the trade balance, there is a huge trade deficit in favor of India, meaning the trade deficit is against the United States. The US registers a trade deficit of $45 billion as per the latest fiscal data, which means India is exporting roughly $87 billion worth of goods to the US market. India's exports roughly stands at around $87 billion per fiscal year, and thus US becomes a critical export market for Indian producers, especially for export oriented industries, which are labor intensive industries that create lakhs of jobs and millions of jobs back home in India. These sectors are heavily dependent on the American market as Indian exports into the US is critical for India's domestic producers. Whereas the US exports hardly around $42 billion worth of goods and services into India. So clearly, there is a trade surplus enjoyed by India that creates a huge trade deficit for the US of around $45 billion. And this is exactly what Trump has been trying to target. But however, Trump's policies has no logic in it. The trade deficit per se is not bad as long as it's a healthy trade deficit. Indian producers were essentially meeting some of the demands in the American market in key sectors. As US itself doesn't produce these goods, it would rely on cheaper imports from India, and it was mutually beneficial for both the sides. American consumers would benefit as they could access the cheaper, high quality goods from India, whereas Indian exporters would benefit, India's domestic industry would benefit from the trade partnership which was developed between the two countries. But now Trump's erratic policies threatens to derail this trade relationship itself. In fact, this has to be the foundation of India-US partnership. But President Trump is hitting right at the foundation of India-US relations. And this is what causes alarm for India. It raises questions about the nature of our strategic partnership. Can India really trust the US as a strategic partner, especially under someone like Trump, who believes in transactional relations, largely business centric relations designed to create benefits for America's corporate sector? India will obviously have doubts about further engagement with the Trump administration in the United States. But neither country can ignore each other. Neither US can ignore India nor India can ignore the US. We have very close defense, intelligence, security relations, and our ties span across multiple domains. But if the very foundation of this relationship is hit because of America's tariff wars, then it raises questions about the very future of India US relationship. Now, if you look at what Donald Trump has said during his first presidency from 2016 to 2020, he repeatedly called India a tariff abuser. And now he has openly posted on social media calling India as an obnoxious country with obnoxious trade policies. He has called out the high tariff and non tariff barriers without understanding why India places those trade barriers. The reason why a developing nation like India places certain tariff and non tariff barriers is to ensure that we protect sensitive sectors like agriculture, like our MSME sector, because these Indian domestic producers, they may not be able to compete with Western farmers or Western conglomerates. They won't be able to match their productivity, their quality, their prices, and any flood of cheaper imports in sensitive agricultural sectors and in the sector of manufacturing will decimate India's domestic production. So, in order to protect domestic industries, we do place certain tariffs and non tariff barriers as well, mainly to keep out few countries, few producers, and few traders who could be a threat for India's domestic industry. But now, what Trump is essentially pushing for is greater American access into the Indian market. He would like to see that America's top conglomerates and corporate entities are given greater market access into India to increase their exports into India. He has even called upon the IT giants to stop hiring in India and instead take those jobs back into the US. But the thing is, in the US market, neither the manpower exists nor the talent and skills required to fill the gap. But any such enforced policy, which could result in shifting of jobs as well, would have a further impact on India's services industry, particularly the tech industry, as we heavily rely on American foreign investments from the tech giants in the US, and they employ lakhs of people in our country. So there are serious questions coming about the trade partnership and the larger relationship itself. But recently, a study was conducted by Bank of Baroda. According to the study, the impact on our GDP because of Trump's tariff policies could be around 0.2% reduction in our GDP numbers. As per latest GDP estimates, India is expected to grow at around 6.6%. So if you take out 0.2%, you might see a drop in our GDP numbers to around 6.4%. So this is a very conservative, a very optimistic estimate. Other experts believe the impact on our GDP could be the range of 0.3 to 0.4%, which means our GDP growth could get revised to around 6.2%. So this indeed is quite significant. But the government of India is confident that the impact would be almost negligible if India can navigate the crisis, if India can find alternate markets, and if we are eventually able to strike a trade deal with the US to restore the trade relations. India is still confident that we will be able to overcome this crisis because an impact of 0.2 to 0.4% on our GDP is quite manageable for India. And many experts, including the government, they're confident that India will be able to tide over this crisis. See, the implication on India, if you look at the impact on GDP, appears slightly nominal and negligible. It appears manageable at least. But if you break down the impact on each sector, that's when the real impact will become evident. There are few key sectors in India which are labor intensive sectors that generate millions of jobs in our country. They are heavily dependent on the American market. Now, because of these high tariffs, what are tariffs? Tariffs are nothing but taxes, import duties. So, these taxes, the higher price is not paid by the government of India, it's not paid by Indian producers or Indian exporters, it's not paid by Indian consumers. This higher cost on Indian imports into US market will be paid by the importers in the US. The importers and traders in the US who are buying goods from India, importing goods from India, they will pay the higher tariffs. And obviously, they will pass down the tariffs to the customer. So eventually, it is the American consumer who will end up paying the higher price. If you understand the basics of economics and foreign trade, right, any student would be able to tell that such tariff wars will eventually affect the country imposing the tariffs. It will disrupt the trade with the other country, but the primary impact of paying higher prices would be on the consumers of the country which is imposing those tariffs. So American consumers will end up paying the price. So as the cost of these Indian imports will increase, the demand might fall as well. right? US traders, US importers will look for alternate suppliers for the same goods. They will diversify where cheaper tariffs are available. And this could reduce the demand for Indian goods eventually and take a hit on few sectors in our economy. Now, take for example the garments industry. India's textile and garments industry is one of the largest in the world. We compete with Bangladesh, Vietnam, and others. But with 25% tariffs, and there are proposed additional tariffs as well, the penalties also kick in. Experts believe the tariff rate could jump to around 35%, which will make trade between India and US almost unviable. It will be impractical for American traders to continue importing Indian goods because US has already struck deals with countries like Vietnam, countries like South Korea, even Indonesia, Philippines, and these countries are direct competitors for India in several sectors. Now you take electronic goods industry. US was a major market for India's electronic goods industry. Now with these higher tariffs kicking in, American traders would prefer to procure electronic goods from South Korea where the tariffs are in the range of 15 to 20%. To take garments and textiles, India has a lot of dependency on American market in the garment and textile sector. If these higher tariffs kick into effect, American traders who are importing the garments and textiles will shift to Vietnam, as Vietnam also has lower tariff rates at around 15 to 20%. There are other important sectors like gems and jewelry, even the leather industry, then automobile components industry. All these key sectors, which are part of our MSME sector, the medium, micro, small enterprises, which are employment generating industries, they will feel the heat. They will take the entire brunt of this eventually, as the demand for Indian goods will drop, as US importers will find alternate suppliers with countries where the tariffs are much cheaper than with India. This will directly take a hit on our export potential into the American market, leading to job layoffs in our country, and it could directly take a hit at the very survival of certain industries in our country. So this is where the concern lies. In few specific sectors, the impact could be disproportionate. In gems and jewelry, leather, and gems and jewelry, garments, auto components, even pharmaceuticals. Indian pharma industry also has major exports. The IT services based industry. All these sectors could take a massive hit. Now, United States has struck deals even with European Union and Japan. Again, the tariffs are averaging in the range of 15 to 20% with all these trade partners. In fact, EU and Japan have got a decent trade off, especially for partners like United Kingdom. The Trump administration has even given some concessions. For example, British car exports into US will almost get very low concessional tariffs at 10%. A lot of British goods are being given duty free access as well. But in return, Britain is making a lot of commitments to invest in the US market. Same with Japan. Japan has committed to invest in a fund which would be managed by the White House directly to bring Japanese investments into US in return for preferential trade treatment for Japanese exports into US. These partners of US have struck much better deals. This is where the question comes up about the trade deal that is currently underway between India and US. The two sides were supposed to work out a mini trade deal by the end of July. But since the agreement could not be worked out, there were a lot of differences between both sides. That's the reason why Trump has gone ahead and announced these tariffs against India. But still, both sides are hopeful that in another couple of months, by fall 2025, by hopefully by September, October, a trade deal should materialize between the two, which might help in bringing down the tariffs against Indian exports. But however, the differences are not easy to be resolved between India and US. Now, let me give you some examples here. You have to understand this clearly. See, United States is pushing for greater market access in the agriculture sector. Now, for India, this is a very sensitive sector, especially the dairy animal husbandry industry. India is very guarded about these critical sectors, even with regard to some important food grains, pulses, etc. We cannot abandon Indian farmers, the interests of the Indian farming community. Given the low productivity of Indian agriculture sector and the fragmented land holdings and the various agrarian challenges faced by our rural farmers, opening them up for competition with American agro exports and American dairy and animal husbandry exports would decimate India's agriculture sector. So, in order to shield and protect the farming community and the rural agrarian community, India has to rely on these tariff and non tariff barriers to keep out the American companies from capitalizing on the Indian market. Same with important sectors in the MSME industry. There are few sensitive sectors like garments, gems, and jewelry, which are the backbones of the Indian economy. So India can't simply open up these critical sectors for competition from Western companies and Western products. So since India will never compromise on this, as these are key electoral issues as well in India, no government would be compromising on these concerns. This is a core national interest. The government of India has already said India will do anything needed to protect its national interests, which means India is preparing to levy reciprocal tariffs on the US. Because foreign trade is all about reciprocity, tit for tat. You give what you get. India has already informed the WTO that India will be considering and implementing reciprocal tariffs against American exports into the Indian market. So, such a trade war will destroy the trade relationship, and that hits at the very foundation of this partnership between India and US. That is why there are serious concerns, very uh, practical questions being raised about the very viability of India-US partnership when President Trump uh, is at the White House. So let me know what you think about this and take up this practice question, means answer writing question. US tariffs on India has cast a shadow over the trade and strategic partnership between the two countries. Critically analyze. So you need to approach this question both from economy perspective and IR perspective. The question is focused on the tariff war and the economic impact, and as well as on the impact of these tensions on the strategic partnership as well. So, the right introduction for this question would be to talk about the nature of India US relations, especially in the last 2 decades. You can point out that this partnership has been labeled as the most defining partnership of the 21st century, the two largest democracies coming together, working in the Indo Pacific, stabilizing the region, acting as a counterbalance to China, trying to uphold international law and rules based order in the Indo Pacific has been very crucial in order to stabilize geopolitics in the region. Both the countries are very close defense security partners as well. So, give an overview of India US relations, why it has been so critical. India has been a major procurer of American weapons and defense systems, right? So, try to plug that in. US is a major source of FDI into India. There are Indian companies operating in the US. India is a major contributor of skilled talent to the American market. So try to bring that overview to show how India US relations have flourished in the last 20 plus years. Then, in the body, can highlight how the trade war threatens to destroy the relationship. That is the analysis you need to be bringing out. Then, in the body, discuss the impact of the tariffs, evaluate why India is guarded about its sensitive sectors, point out that American policies are not rational per se, and the only solution here is to work out a trade deal as soon as possible, like how European Union, South Korea, Vietnam, Japan, Philippines, Indonesia have done. Similarly, India, US have to strike a trade deal as soon as possible, or else they risk threatening the very foundation of this partnership. So you have to provide this as the solution. Finalizing a trade agreement, which is a basic compromise, which takes care of interests of both the sides at least, is something that is absolutely necessary. And then conclude your answer. In the conclusion, you can point out how in diplomacy, bilateral relations are never the same. They keep on evolving, they keep on changing. Even with best friends, best partners, relationship might go through periods of turmoil, right? You can point out there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. It's only permanent interests that matters in international relations. Though US has been a strategic partner, today the relationship is being tested because of America's policies against India. So this would make for a well-rounded, well-structured answer. So please take up what we have discussed and try to write an answer and post your answers in the comment section. Now let's look at another detailed article on page 13 that talks about a pressing issue in Northeast India. The issue of illegal encroachment of forest land has become a serious concern in northeastern states, especially in the state of Assam. The government of Assam has been alleging from the last decade that illegal migrants from Bangladesh, the Bengali migrants, have encroached forest land and even government land and reserve protected areas. And this is seen as a threat, not just as a security threat, but even as a social demographic threat. And the politics in Assam is quite polarized on this particular issue. Recently, the government of Assam has started a eviction drive. In fact, it has been going on at least from 2016. But following a recent ruling of the Guwahati High Court, the government of Assam has stepped up these evictions from forested areas and from government land and protected areas. And the communities that were residing here, they are all being branded as illegal migrants from Bangladesh, primarily Bengali Muslims, and they are being driven out from the forested land. Now, there are two ways of looking at this particular controversy, and it's important to understand the implications as well and why the neighboring states of Assam are worried and concerned about it. See, the government of Assam has a valid point. India has been a victim of large scale influx of illegal migrants from Bangladesh from 1971. Prior to 1971, when East Pakistan existed, India had received a huge flow of refugees, once in 1947 during partition, and then in 1970-71 when Pakistan committed a genocide of the Bengali community. But accepting refugees, protecting them was a humanitarian obligation on India. But post 1971, after India helped in the liberation of Bangladesh, India played a direct role in the 1971 conflict, fought a war against Pakistan and liberated Bangladesh. So post the creation of Bangladesh from 1971 onwards, India has received a constant inflow of illegal migrants. And India has been affected by the flow of illegal migrants from Bangladesh, especially in states like Assam. In fact, in 1970s itself, the large-scale entry of illegal migrants became a major social political issue because this led to socio-ethnic tensions in the state of Assam, as the large-scale illegal migration was causing demographic changes on the ground. Because see, in the Northeast, if you look at the society in the Northeast, it's a multi-ethnic tribal society that is dominated by several indigenous tribes, ethnic forest dwelling tribal groups and communities. Tribal communities and indigenous ethnic groups are very guarded about their rights and their resources. They're very guarded about their land, their language, their identity, and access to resources. So, any entry of outsiders in a tribal belt is always seen with suspicion. It always raises concern about loss of land, loss of rights, loss of identity, losing access to resources. And as a result, the tensions will flare up between the so called outsiders and the natives. This will eventually turn into clashes and violence, either on ethnic lines or religious lines. So, Northeast India has been a victim of these socio ethnic problems caused by the demographic changes in the Northeast due to large scale inflow of illegal migrants from Bangladesh. In fact, this became the root cause for the Assam agitation that lasted from 1979 to 1985. Essentially, the natives of Assam, right, the Assamese, led by the Students' Union and the political parties, they violently protested against the problem caused by illegal migration, resulting in destabilization of Assam. Finally, the agitation was brought to an end through the Assam Accord of 1985. Under the Assam Accord, the government of India had promised to update the National Register for Citizens, the NRC, to identify the foreigners, the illegal foreigners who have entered Assam after the cutoff date, that is after 24th March 1971, and to deport the illegal foreigners in order to protect the rights and resources and identity of the natives. Now, despite the Assam Accord, during the Assam agitation, in Assam, insurgency had also broken out on this particular issue. Several radical Assamese students who opposed the illegal migration even started off insurgency against India, seeking the liberation of Assam from India. That's how insurgent groups like ULFA were born. ULFA's primary goal was against the illegal migration from Bangladesh, and it blamed the government of India, the government of Assam for the crisis, and it sought to liberate Assam, to break Assam away from the Indian Union. In fact, the same problem has been seen in other states as well, like Tripura. The Tripuri insurgency that rose its head in 1970s, 1980s was also a result of illegal migration from Bangladesh. The native Tripuris, some of the radical extremist elements, took up insurgency against the government of India for the large-scale entry of illegal Bangladeshis. But however, now, though the scale of illegal migration has reduced, according to the BSF, the border guarding force that protects the India-Bangladesh border, the extent and scale of illegal migration has reduced. But still, it remains a persistent problem, as the illegal migrants who had entered in the past, they have settled in some of the forested areas, and their spread is something that threatens the native community. So this issue has become a highly sensitive political issue, which has been used to polarize voters by different sections of the political spectrum. The current ruling BJP has taken a nationalist stand. In fact, one of the primary electoral promises made by the current ruling party was to evict the illegal refugees and the migrants who have entered the country, and to protect the native land and the native rights. So, ever since coming to power, since 2016, Assam has been conducting these eviction drives, as the presence of illegal migrants is not just a social threat, it's also seen as an environmental threat, as it leads to deforestation. It threatens the biodiversity. According to government of Assam, a lot of illegal encroachments have been found in Kaziranga National Park, in other critical habitats and wetland ecosystems. So the government of Assam, based on the orders of Guwahati High Court, has been conducting these proactive eviction drives where the alleged illegal migrants are being driven out. Now the point is the government really sure that those who are being evicted, are they really illegal migrants? How did the government establish the identity? That has always been a big question. It appears that certain targeting is taking place on religious lines, where the Muslim community has been seen as the target, because there is a large stereotype that most illegal migrants are Bengali Muslims, which is true to some extent, but this could lead to unfair targeting of Indian Muslims as well on religious lines. Because if the eviction drive acquires a religious color, that would lead to targeting of Indian Muslims who might be legitimate Indian citizens, but they could get evicted and driven out. But of course, no illegal settlement or encroachment can be allowed in forested areas and protected areas. On environmental grounds, be it a Indian citizen or a illegal foreigner, anybody who's encroaching on forest land has to be evicted. There's no doubt about it. In that regard, the government is absolutely right that such encroachment represents not just a social threat but an environmental threat as well. But serious questions have come up, that on what basis is the eviction being carried out? How is the government establishing the identity? And what will happen to those evicted? What is their future? So, this is where the neighboring states are really concerned and alarmed. Neighboring states of Nagaland, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, even Manipur. Because see, at one point, Nagaland, Meghalaya, Mizoram, they were all part of the larger state of Assam, which were later carved out between 1963 to 1972. Since then, border issues have existed between these states. Assam, Arunachal Pradesh have a border dispute. Assam, Meghalaya have a border dispute. Assam, Mizoram have a major border dispute, which had even flared up in 2021, which had resulted in violent border clashes. Now, these neighboring states, they have a fear that those who are being evicted, they might cross over and enter the neighboring states and settle in the forested areas of these states. Even in the other northeastern states, there is opposition to the entry of outsiders and illegal migrants. Since even in these states like Nagaland, Mizoram, there are native indigenous tribes, they wouldn't like to accept outsiders and illegal foreigners as they see them as a threat for their land, their rights, and resources. So many insurgencies in the Northeast has been on the lines of identity, has been on the lines of rights and resources. So they fear that the eviction drive in Assam is also a deliberate attempt to push people from forested areas across the border into the neighboring states. So later, Assam can step up its territorial claims as far as the border dispute is concerned with the neighboring states. See, right now, Assam has partially worked out the border issue with Meghalaya and Arunachal Pradesh. At least partially it has been resolved. But the boundary issue with Nagaland, with Mizoram, still continues to be present and it can even flare up at any point. So these neighboring states have been taking countermeasures, stepping up border security along the interstate boundaries because they want to prevent the entry of these people who are being evicted in the forest lands of Assam. So this could easily escalate either into interstate issues, into border clashes as well over the boundary dispute, or it could even result in interethnic, interreligious clashes as the issue has been heavily politicized and polarized. So it is this volatile situation which is being examined in this article. This article helps us understand how the deep rooted social problems in Assam and the problem of illegal migration from Bangladesh has played a big role in contributing to the volatility in the Northeast region. That is what we take away from this article. And please take up this practice question for your answer writing practice. The question of illegal encroachment of forest land in Northeast India is a sensitive issue which has implications for the region's security and stability. Comment. Now let's move on to the next article from Environment and Ecology. In the Thar desert, the government of India and government of Rajasthan have been actively pushing for wind power projects as the desert area, the arid region in Rajasthan and which extends towards Gujarat, provides the perfect conditions for wind power projects, which is clean, renewable energy. As India looks to decarbonize the economy, reduce its carbon emissions, transition to clean, renewable energy, wind power has acquired more and more significance. According to estimates, India has a potential of around 1,163 gigawatts of wind power potential. Currently, we have around 51 gigawatts of installed capacity, which means there is still a lot of untapped potential. Out of the estimated 1,163 gigawatt potential, hardly 51 gigawatt is the installed capacity that we have today. But India is very quickly accelerating wind energy projects. In the first half of 2025, India has added up to 3.5 gigawatts of installed capacity from wind energy projects. Very soon, India will be able to achieve up to 10 gigawatts of installed capacity in a given year, which means more and more wind turbine projects are going to come up across India, especially in the desert region of Thar desert in Rajasthan. Now, these wind projects are a big environmental threat. Wind projects are considered to be a major threat for birds. The turbine blades, are known to collide with birds, posing a major threat for the bird population in these areas. A study which has been conducted recently has shown that the Thar Desert has the world's highest risk for the birds because of these wind projects. On an average, every month, from each single turbine which has been installed, 1.24 birds are getting killed because of direct collision with the turbine blades. This again is a conservative estimate. The numbers could be much higher. The study has revealed the bird carcasses of 4,400 plus birds which were found near the turbines, which means their deaths are directly attributed to it. And the actual number could be much higher as well. Now, in comparison, wind projects in Kutch region of Gujarat, in the Davangere region of Karnataka, the bird mortality rate is much lower because of the design of the turbines and as well as the location and the wind factors. In the Kutch region and Davangere, the bird mortality rate is much lower at around zero point 0.4 birds getting killed per turbine in a given month. But in the Thar desert area, because of the widespread distribution of the bird population, there is a wider distribution of bird population, especially raptors are found in larger numbers. Studies have established that raptors are the most vulnerable to get hit by wind turbines compared to any other species of bird. And also, don't forget, this part of Rajasthan sits right in the middle of the Central Asian Flyway, which is a major bird migratory corridor. Birds from Central Asia, Eurasia region, they migrate during the winter to avoid the harsh winters of Central Asia and Eurasia. They migrate towards the tropics. They come down towards India as far away as South India and Sri Lanka as well. And this migratory route of the birds is very crucial for various threatened species of birds. And Rajasthan is a critical habitat, right? The Thar Desert area and the Ranthambore region present around it, and the Aravalis as well, is a key habitat. There are many bird sanctuaries present as well in this region. And as a result, there is a very high risk for the bird biodiversity. For example, this region is home to the great Indian bustard, which today is critically endangered. And the Thar Desert and the arid areas of Gujarat and Rajasthan is the last remaining habitat of the great Indian bustard. It's being driven towards extinction. There are hardly a few hundred individuals left in the wild, and their very existence is being threatened because of wind power projects and the power lines that are laid over here that transmit the energy generated. So, wind turbines and the high tension power lines in Rajasthan Gujarat belt has been considered to be the biggest threat for the critically endangered great Indian bustard. That's why environmental experts are warning the government to be cautious, because these projects, though they are necessary for India's cleaner transition towards renewable energy, though it is absolutely necessary, care has to be taken to minimize the overall environmental impact of these projects. So, what can be done to ensure the safety of these wind projects, to ensure wind turbines are safer for birds? According to experts and organizations like BirdLife International, BirdLife International is a global NGO working in the field of conservation of birds, especially migratory birds. BirdLife International recommends that the turbine blades should be painted with high visibility color. High visibility paint can be used to paint one side of the turbine blade so that the blades are clearly visible for the birds. So they avoid a direct head on collision with the turbines of the wind power projects. This is one suggestion. The second suggestion is to turn off the turbines during particular seasons for certain number of hours when the highest bird activity is reported in the area. To shut down the turbines for few hours in a day when peak bird activity is recorded, and also during peak seasons, especially during breeding season and the migratory season. But this proposal is again not practically viable because, first of all, wind projects have limitations. They are dependent on the weather condition. They can't operate 24/7. They don't generate uninterrupted power, right? Just like solar energy, wind energy is intermittent, meaning whenever the opportunity is present, the right ideal conditions are there, you have to extract the energy, store it in batteries, and then use it. And upon that, you have to shut down the turbines for certain hours in a day, for certain seasons. Then wind projects will become economically unviable. So, one option is to paint the turbine blades with high visibility paint. And apart from that, conservation efforts. focused on creating better habitats for the birds to avoid to push them away from these corridors is what is needed. But experts are also suggesting that we should focus more on offshore wind projects. There is not only greater potential for energy generation offshore, but it could be much safer as well for our environment and ecosystem. Offshore wind projects are nothing but wind turbines which are set up off the coastline, directly in the seas and the oceans. India has a vast coastline from Gujarat to West Bengal with island territories as well. Correct? Our the coastline length, which was around 7,500 kilometers, has now been remeasured, and currently the length of the coastline stands at around 11,000 plus kilometers. India has a very vast coastline. We have a very vast exclusive economic zone of 2.3 million square kilometers. India has a massive exclusive economic zone of 2.3 million square kilometers where these offshore wind power projects can be pushed at greater speed. India already is focusing on offshore wind projects, but writers are saying that there should be much more focus to shift all the wind turbines away from the land, away from the bird corridors, and shift them to offshore facilities across the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean, where we can not only generate more energy because of the high speed wind which is available here, the wind potential which is there, but this is much more safer to the environment because studies have established that the impact of offshore wind projects on marine life is actually limited. Only during construction, when the turbine is being set up, for few days there is some disturbance caused, especially the very sensitive species like dolphins, sharks, and other species of fish. They stay away from the construction site for few days or few weeks. But once the construction is done, right? Once the plant starts to operate, it becomes almost noiseless, and the impact has been noticed to be very limited. The impact of operational wind turbines on marine life is very limited, much safer. And usually, birds don't frequent those areas. The possibility of the impact is much lesser. That's why the article is suggesting that India should prioritize offshore wind projects as compared to onshore wind projects. So, this is what we take away from this important article. Now, coming to the next topic. On page 10, we have an article related to interstate river dispute between Odisha and Chhattisgarh. The state of Chhattisgarh and Odisha have a standing water dispute over the mighty Mahanadi River. Now, first, let's learn about the Mahanadi River, very important for prelims. I'll give you some important facts, and after that, we'll discuss about the dispute and what is the update presented in this article. The Mahanadi River takes birth in the Dandakaranya region of Chhattisgarh, which is also the Naxal hotbed. That's where the origin streams are considered to be located, particularly in the Raipur district. This is where the river has its upstream located. There are some catchment areas and small streams located in Madhya Pradesh, parts of Maharashtra, and Jharkhand as well. But the river primarily flows from Chhattisgarh into Odisha and then drains into Bay of Bengal. So Mahanadi is primarily shared between Chhattisgarh and Odisha, though Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand are considered to be part of the drainage basin. Now, the waters of Mahanadi is crucial for both the states, especially Odisha, being the lower riparian, is heavily dependent on it for agriculture. In fact, the Mahanadi is where the largest dam in our country has been built, the Hirakud Dam, which is vital for agriculture irrigation in this region. A lot of lakes and streams also depend on the flow of waters in the Mahanadi. The fishery sector also is heavily dependent, not just agriculture. The waters also supply the required water for Chilka Lake, a very important coastal lagoon, a key bird habitat as well, a very critical ecosystem. In fact, the entire coastline of Odisha, across Gahirmata, Rushikulya, where the river drains into Bay of Bengal, this is where the mass nesting sites of the olive ridley turtles is also present. So the entire ecosystem, the habitats are dependent on the waters of Mahanadi. And culturally also it has a lot of significance apart from the economic and environmental significance. This is where the Jagannath Puri temple, famous pilgrimage site, one of the Char Dhams, that's exactly where it is located, right? So The waters of Mahanadi, which is crucial for both the states, is known for heavy silt deposition, forming these silt based deltas, deltaic formations, as it meets the Bay of Bengal. Now, the sharing of the waters of Mahanadi has been disputed between the two states. So, under the constitution, interstate disputes are handled as per a constitutional provision, right? Article, can you find out which article? Can you tell me in the comments? Take this as a small exercise, a small homework. Which article of the constitution deals with interstate water disputes? It provides for tribunals to be set up to resolve these interstate water disputes, and it tries to keep them out of court's jurisdiction as well. So, to resolve the water sharing dispute over Mahanadi, which has been standing for many years, the Mahanadi Water Sharing Tribunal had been set up by the government of India. After many rounds of talks, the final award has yet to come. So now Odisha, Chhattisgarh are looking to strike a deal. They are looking to work out. They're looking to work out a deal, an arrangement, without having to wait for the final award of the water sharing disputes tribunal. So the government of Odisha has reached out to Chhattisgarh. Chief Minister of Odisha has proposed that let us set up a high-powered committee, a joint committee, a high-powered joint committee that will have representation from both the states, from Odisha and Chhattisgarh. And this committee would be under the Jal Shakti Ministry, the Union Ministry of Jal Shakti, so that the union government can play the role of a coordinator. The committee could be headed by the Central Water Commission, and it could have official representation from the state governments of Odisha and Chhattisgarh, so that they can jointly manage the waters without waiting for the final award of the disputes tribunal. Usually, such awards of water dispute tribunal will reach the doorstep of Supreme Court. We have seen that with other states and other river disputes. So Odisha, Chhattisgarh are trying to avoid the route of litigation and hostility. So they want to work out an arrangement, set up a high-powered joint committee, which would be directly under the Jal Shakti Ministry, led by the Central Water Commission. So let's see if this deal can come out and if it can be implemented. Now let's move on to the prelim section. Let's take a quick look at all the small articles in today's newspaper. So look at this article on page number 6. It refers to the LVM-3, which is an upcoming launch vehicle of ISRO, which is all set to become the future workhorse of ISRO. ISRO says that by 2027, the launch of LVM-3 with a semi-cryogenic engine would be perfected, and the first launch would be carried out in a couple of years. Now, why is this such a big milestone? See, ISRO's most powerful rocket till date has been the GSLV Mark III. Now, this has been renamed as LVM-3, Launch Vehicle Mark III. So, GSLV Mark III is essentially your LVM-3. This has been the most powerful rocket ISRO has ever developed, but the success of GSLV Mark III has been dependent on the cryogenic stage. Cryogenic technology is a critical technology and very hard to master as well. In cryogenic combustion, essentially liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen is combined, and the combustion is very hard to control. It generates tremendous amount of temperature. You need special material to be able to withstand that high temperature, and you have to control the entire burn sequence. And also the oxidized combustion which happens can easily damage the components itself. So mastering cryogenic combustion is not easy, where the liquid propellants, the fuel, which is at negative uh, temperature, stored at almost minus 273 degrees Celsius. Carrying out such combustion at cryogenic temperatures and controlling that sequence is not easy. You need special technology, special materials. ISRO has been chasing this technology for many decades. But now we have recently found some success, and we have developed a semi cryogenic engine, which would be the last stage of this rocket. And cryogenic engines are critical for space exploration because these cryogenic engines are much more superior than other regular solid and liquid propelled engines, because the thrust they generate is much higher, many times higher, and it can help in deploying heavier payloads into orbit. It can help in giving the required thrust for deep space missions. So that's why agencies like NASA are able to, pioneer long distance missions and even deploy the payloads in a matter of few days because of the mastering of cryogenic technology. Whereas ISRO takes a lot of time as we place the payloads in different orbits, slowly raise the orbit through orbit raising maneuvers, which takes more time and more fuel. So with the inception of LVM3, which might take another couple of years, once India perfects the technology, in combination with our Vikas engine, the liquid propelled Vikas engine, India would have perfected the heavy lift rocket. It will give us the capability to lift even up to 5 to 6 tons of payload into orbit, into GTO orbit, the geosynchronous transfer orbit. Right now, the GSLV series of rockets, they are capable of lifting up to 4.2 tons, 4,200 kilograms of payload without a cryogenic engine. With a semi cryogenic engine, which uses liquid refined kerosene with liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen at cryogenic temperatures, it generates so much thrust in the last stage that it can easily lift the payload with a weight range of up to 5 to 6 tons as well. And with a full-fledged cryogenic engine, eventually India will have the ability to lift super heavy payloads above 6 tons as well. And this would play a critical role in our space exploration missions, deep space missions as well. Next, a tragedy has struck Uttarakhand again. Uttarakhand is one of the most disaster prone states in our country. The Himalayan belt is very prone to earthquakes, landslides, avalanches, cloudburst events, and flash floods, and even GLOF events, glacial lake outburst floods. This time it's a landslip, again in the Chamoli district. And the landslip has directly affected a hydropower project, the Vishnugad Hydel project, which is part of the Tehri Hydro Development Corporation, has been struck by this landslip, and 12 laborers have been injured. Many of them are still struck, and it highlights the disaster vulnerability of Uttarakhand. This reminds me of a similar disaster back in 2021, the Chamoli disaster. Essentially, a large piece of rock and ice had slid down in an avalanche like type of event, and it crashed into the river downstream, particularly in the Doli Ganga, Alkananda, and Rishi Ganga rivers, causing a massive flash flood. Even then, it was the hydropower plants of NTPC at Tapovan, at Vishnuprayag, which were completely decimated, and hundreds of workers were trapped and killed in this deadly disaster that occurred few years ago. So landslip events, avalanche events are very, very dangerous in the Himalayan belt. A landslip essentially occurs under the force of gravity when there is structural weakness in the slope, right? And it could occur due to natural factors, due to man-made factors as well. Man-made activities like heavy construction, controlled explosions because of mining and infrastructure projects could weaken the top structure of the slope, and also construction activities in general, increasing human settlements, deforestation, because the vegetation cover will give some structural support to the top layer of the slope, but heavy deforestation and construction of buildings, over tourism, over construction, weakens the slope and its integrity, and it causes the slope to slide and crash into the downstream valley. Avalanche is a very similar event where the sheet of snow and ice will come crashing down. So these landslides that occur in the Himalayan belt, they have a deadly effect, especially the projects which are going on, the strategic road projects of India, power projects of India. But experts argue that these projects are the reason why the Himalayan belt is becoming more sensitive and delicate. Mega public projects like hydropower projects, large scale road construction, tunneling work will require controlled explosions and earth movement. So, when such activities are taken up on a large scale, it obviously destabilizes the slope, and especially during monsoon months when there is heavy rainfall, melting of snow as well. This creates a perfect condition for large landslips to occur, which can cause these deadly disasters. So, this is something that you need to take note of. Next, we have an article on India Post and its ongoing transformation. At one point, everybody had written the obituary of India Post, especially when computers came up, when internet and email came up. Everybody assumed that by early 2000, India Post would be dead. It would be a dead organization because nobody would write letters and send posts anymore. But India Post has been one resilient organization. It has shown the ability to adapt. It has shown the ability to take in new technologies, adapt its internal processes. Because, see, postal services, especially in a developing country like India, they play a much bigger role, a socio-economic role, beyond delivering posts and letters. Postal services, India Post in particular, has the highest reach. The last mile connectivity that India Post has established is unmatchable. No other entity, no other organization in the country has the kind of reach that India Post has, even in the remotest corners of India today. Yes, maybe posts and letters have become slightly outdated, but India Post has been very resilient. It has very successfully adopted new technologies, right? It underwent IT revolution, adopted computers, digitization, introduced speed posts and fast couriers, right? And it even entered the banking sector to handle banking services and deliver saving initiatives, saving schemes for Indian citizens. And thus, it has successfully managed to tide over the changes in technology. But today, India Post is again facing an existential threat, right? Due to the widespread adoption of new form of online payments and newer forms of communication, posts and letters are becoming even more outdated. So India Post is transforming once more. It is adopting new age technology, right? Not just to transforming its banking initiatives, but mainly to transform its postal and courier services as well. It is all set to roll out UPI digital payments. It has brought up a new digital platform called APT, the new Advanced Postal Technology, a completely new digital platform which is designed to accept digital payments through UPI, making it seamless for the consumer. It is designed to improve consumer experience. And India Post is introducing a brand new consumer experience, right from sending out a courier to tracking it in real time, ensuring gets delivered to the right place and location with OTP based authentication and verification. Right, this complete transformation is being achieved, and India Post is also rolling out DigiPin initiative, where the pin codes are being digitized with precise geospatial data, latitudinal, longitudinal data from satellites is being integrated with pin codes under the DigiPin initiative to ensure accurate delivery of every package, every courier, every post and letter. It provides for seamless real time tracking, and the banking services are also set to improve with acceptance of UPI payments. Correct? And India Post is also trying to work out a system where even if a resident changes the address, if you move to a new location, still your letters should reach the right person. Such kind of a system is being developed, a sort of a universal system that even if you keep changing your residential address, right, and you don't update your residential address, still India Post wants to put in place a system where the right recipient can be reached out and still the post and courier can be delivered. So such a system is also being developed. This is how India Post has managed to stay relevant. It has been an engine of transformation, of learning. It has adapted to all the changes. When everybody had written its death and obituary, India Post actually emerged stronger, and today it actually plays a critical role in delivery of many socio-economic welfare programs. Now, coming to the next update for prelims, Bangladesh is all set to declare August 5th as July Declaration Day with constitutional status. The interim government of Bangladesh under Muhammad Yunus has brought up a proposal to introduce a change in the constitution of Bangladesh where a constitutional recognition would be given for 5th of August to mark last year's overthrow of Sheikh Hasina's regime. Last year, if you remember, in July, that's when the student led protests took momentum. And by August 5th, Sheikh Hasina was driven out of the country, leading to the political transformation that happened. So, to recognize this massive change, Bangladesh is considering to declare August 5th as July Declaration Day, and this would be given constitutional status. This obviously has implications regarding the political developments in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is set to go for elections next year. India will be closely watching the developments. The Muhammad Yunus interim government has even been hostile to India. There has been a rise of hostile forces in Bangladesh which threatens India's security. Right now, our ties with Bangladesh has been severely affected. This is something you need to note down. The July Declaration is being proposed by Bangladeshi government to recognize August 5th as the day of that political revolution that happened, and they're looking to give this constitutional status as well. Coming to the last article for today, there's an art and culture topic, a very unique cultural tradition from coastal Maharashtra, from the Konkan belt, the Ratnagiri belt of Maharashtra, a traditional sport of the farmers, the agrarian community in Ratnagiri and the Konkan region called Nangarni Sparda. This essentially is a sport, a race, which is rooted in agrarian tradition and culture, where farmers train their oxen for this race in a mud field, which is a widely appreciated cultural event and a sporting event. So please make a note of this. Okay, and there is a similar sport in coastal Karnataka, in Malnad Karnataka region. Now, can you find out the name of this sport in coastal Karnataka? A very similar sport where the agrarian community, it's a community event where the entire village comes together, even the surrounding nearby villages, they participate in these high intense, high octane sports where farmers would have trained their oxen, well built oxen, and they use it for a race in a mud field. In case of Karnataka, instead of the oxen, it's the buffalo which is used, the water buffaloes. So, can you find out the name of this similar sport which is seen in coastal Karnataka and the Malnad region of Karnataka? Please mention the answer in the comment section. On this note, I bring my discussion to an end. We have completed all the articles in the most comprehensive manner. I hope you guys have liked the session, understood all the topics, and if you did benefit from the class, do press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That's it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.